Welcome to the Contra Costa County Office of Education webinar series. Today's webinar is called iPossibilities, and I'm Adrienne DeWolf, a tech specialist at the Contra Costa County Office of Education, and I will be your presenter and facilitator today. So I want to just review some of the tools in GoToWebinar in case you're not familiar with them. Be sure to use the raise your hand tool if there's something you would like to respond to or get my attention about. And be sure to type your questions in the question window and I will respond. Okay, so today is titled iPossibilities, and it's all about empowering our learners. I love this quote from Will Daggett. Learning should be an active process. Too often, students come to school to watch their teachers work. So here's a question for you to be thinking about as we talk about some of the possibilities with apps today. What kinds of apps are your students mostly using? Are they skill-based? Is it mostly consumption? Or are they creating content, creation apps? And what does transformative use look like? So we know that SAMR model of transformation, where we know that often our teachers start at that substitution level. We all start there, where we sort of use the tech as a direct substitute, but there's not a big change in what we're doing with it in the classroom. And we really want to get our students and teachers up to redefinition, creating new tasks that previously were inconceivable. And we'll be talking about some of those possibilities. And just a minute to look at the depths of knowledge and review a bit of this as we talk about the three apps that I'm going to share with you today, or the three genre of apps. And to notice that we, when possible, really want to try to extend our students' thinking. Research has shown that most of our classrooms are somewhere in level 1 or 2, which of course is necessary at times in order to get to level 3 or 4. But there's not enough time being spent in those higher, deeper levels of knowledge. So with the apps that we'll discuss today, students will be creating content, designing ways to share their learning, synthesizing and applying concepts. So I love this quote from George Couros: learning is creation, not consumption. Knowledge is not something a learner absorbs, but something a learner creates. And I just wanted to share with you a picture of my son, who recently, at the beginning of 4th grade, broke his arm this school year. There's his grandma signing his cast. But because he broke his arm, he could not write. He's a left-handed writer, and he struggles with fine motor as it is. So he got to bring his own iPad to school for the first few weeks. And it was amazing what he created simply because he could pick up his iPad anytime he felt necessary. And the way that he would mash up different apps to create his content. I'll show you some of the samples of his work later along with other student work. But sometimes he would come home and show me something and I would say, well, did that take you longer than the other kids who were doing it on paper? And he'd said, oh no, Mom, I did it in about half the time. So I know often we think that these things are going to take our students longer, but when they are proficient with the apps, it really is amazing what they can create if we let them. So this is a picture of Alan November presenting, and one of the things he talks about is the importance of teachers in this digital age. And teachers are more important than ever because we need to thoughtfully be designing our assignments, our assessments, our projects in ways that can empower our students as learners and contributors. So he talks about how pioneering teachers are providing students with these new roles where they can make contributions to their learning communities, using easy-to-use tools such as screencasting and podcasting that give students opportunities to contribute content to the class. At the same time, we can also provide them with rigorous and more motivating assignments. It's a really exciting time, and I would agree with him. But we really have to empower our teachers to use the technologies in these powerful ways for our students as well. So the point of today's webinar is to think about what could students do with 3 open-ended, versatile apps. And the 3 apps I'm going to show you, and it doesn't really matter which apps, I will show you specific ones, but the categories are important because information is coming at us so fast today. It is really important that we understand how to use images and information to deliver our ideas, to deliver our message, to show our learning. So one of the apps I'm going to share with you is an app that you can create info pics through. Another one is image annotation, which sort of goes with those info pics in order to show our learning and to be able to communicate data or communicate a deep understanding of something using imagery as well as text and other tools. And finally, the third app I'm going to show you is a screencasting app. So the other point that I want to bring home today is that less really is more. When we go into our classrooms and we pick up into our classrooms that have iPads, for example, and we pick up a student iPad and we look at the apps that are loaded on that iPad, frequently, and I'm in a lot of different types of classrooms, frequently there are so many apps loaded on that iPad. But if I were to then sit down and talk to a student and ask them what apps they're actually using, it's a pretty small list. And often it's more in that skill-based or consumption area that we talked about at the beginning, not creation. So I really want to encourage us as classroom teachers to think about that less really is more. Instead of having a slew of apps that we introduce our students to, if we had, for example, 3 really open-ended creation apps, kids could really know them very well, so the understanding of the app wouldn't be a barrier to what they could produce. And what they could produce could probably be really amazing. So the first app that I want to talk about is called Sketch. And Sketch is an image annotation app. And I'm going to show you a couple of examples of Common Core-based products and projects that kids have done at different grade levels. So let me go ahead and get out of full screen in my Haiku Deck. Haiku Deck, by the way, is an app for the iPad. It's free. It's sort of like an image-based PowerPoint, and it really makes beautiful, beautiful presentations. So I encourage you to check it out. So I'm going to go take you to my website, and I want to remind you that everything that I share today will be posted on our CCCOE PD wiki, and I'll review that at the end. So my website is www.digichica.org, and if you were to go to my website to get to today's webinar content, you would click on Trainings and iPossibilities, the title of today's webinar. And there you would see my Haiku Deck presentation, as well as the 3 apps and the content that I'm going to show with you. So let's talk a little bit about Sketch and some of the amazing things that kids can do with Sketch. So again, it's from the creators of Evernote. It is simply an image annotation app, and I think it's one of those apps that is essential for students and teachers. As you can see in the sample right here, and let me zoom in just a little bit. This sample shows a map because in Sketch, you can actually look up an address or just search within the world map to a location, snap a screenshot essentially of it within the app, and then use all the annotation tools. So here's an example from a kindergarten classroom. Matt Gomez is an amazing teacher. If you haven't seen his blog, mattbgomez.com. It's really incredible, and I would highly recommend you take a look at it if you're working with younger students. So here's an example of how he used Sketch in his classroom. And the aspect ratio is a little stretched, but you get the idea. So they were reading Martin's Big Words, which is a storybook about Martin Luther King. It's a wonderful story. And he was having his kindergartners come up with words that Martin Luther King stood for. And as you can see, this is just an image brought into Sketch. Using the text tool in Sketch, they added those words. Then the students took their own pictures, brought them into Sketch, and developed their own big words. What things were important to them that were like Martin's messages? So that's in a kindergarten example. And here's another example from Matt in the science realm of kindergarten, which this could really be at any grade level because science is so visual and hands-on when it's done well. And as you can see, they were studying plants, and they snapped a picture of the plants growing in their classroom, and then they labeled it using the arrows and the text tool in Sketch. Here's a first grade class that made a book by taking community pictures. We know that community is a big social studies unit in first grade, and the students took pictures around their community and then labeled them with simple text. And as you can see, best guess spelling. Here's another one where first graders were labeling shapes. They were learning, about rectangular prisms, cylinders, and so on. So you can see the versatility of that app and how handy it is. Here's a fourth grade sample. This is actually one of the things that my son did with one of his app smashes. So he just used WoW Paint, which is a free drawing app, to draw this, what I'll call this wave, but it was to represent the rise and fall of plot in the narrative he was creating. And then he used Sketch to label the rise and fall of his plot. And as you can see, this was a story about a bully. And at the end, the bully challenges him, and the boy wins the race, and all is well. So, but a really great way to show his understanding of the rise and fall of plot. So here's a fifth grade classroom that was doing a roller coaster project in physics. This was a STEM project, and they had to design a roller coaster with 2 loops and a curve. And after they set it up and tested it with marbles, and they had to make it successful and work and use measurements, obviously, a lot of math involved in here. Then they took a picture and created a diagram to show their roller coaster and what they learned, and label their loops, their measurements, kinetic energy, potential energy, and so on. So that's a great example from a 5th grade classroom. The other thing about Sketch is that it works great with those skill and drill apps. Like I said at the beginning, I said we really want to spend more time at that deeper, higher level of creation and deep thinking rather than skill and drill with our technology. But that is not to say that skill and drill doesn't have a place, and that these devices are great for skill and drill, as long as that's not the only way we're using them. But with Sketch, you can have students use a math skill and drill app like this one, for example, which is called Oh No Fractions. And instead of just letting them play and not really knowing if they're just pressing buttons and actually processing any of the learning that they're working on, any of the skills, you could actually have them snap a screenshot of one of the screens in the app as they're working. This could be a requirement to demonstrate their understanding, bring it into Sketch, and then write their reflection right here on the screenshot to show what they learned. So here's JD's, and again, this was the Oh No Fractions app. He was practicing multiplying fractions, and he brought it a little bit further by saying this example could have also been reduced to get 3/10. So Sketch is just such a versatile app. I use it all the time as a trainer of teachers to label screenshots and label things within different software and applications in order to train teachers as well when I make my handouts. This was a middle school classroom, and I'll have to show you that one later. They went outside and labeled nouns in their classroom. And this is a high school classroom that was learning quantum physics by using Angry Birds. Talk about a motivating project by this teacher. So this is really interesting to me. So he had them take screenshots within the Angry Birds app, and then they were learning about trajectory and parabolas and vectors and the math involved in that physics. So this is so fascinating. And so they had to take a screenshot and label their understanding of quantum physics applied to Angry Birds. So I mentioned that I use it all the time in my handouts. So I want to point out that I have linked right here on my iPossibilities page, my handout for all 3 apps that we're going to talk about. And this is what I call an app challenge. This is when I work with teachers and I ask them to try to create a task that goes with the app that would be a practical way for them to learn it and possibly apply it to then their own classroom practice. So this is one of the handouts. There's one for all 3 apps, and you are welcome to download those. I also want to mention that I've posted a tutorial on the Sketch app, and if time, we'll go through the app. But if you need to review or you're training others, this is a great tutorial. 5 minutes takes you through a video tutorial on how to use Sketch. And then finally, I also have center directions for all of the apps, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, but this is how I would use them in various classrooms when I come in and work with students. I set up these centers with directions to keep it really self-directed. Okay, so I'm going to go back to Haiku, and we're going to talk about a couple of other apps. And I have a great quote here from our friend Einstein. If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. And I mentioned at the beginning that the 3 apps that I'm sharing were very image driven, and we know how important it is that our students know how to convey and communicate their understanding using images. And we really need to start redefining how they share their learning by using these different applications, these different creative ways for them to share their understanding. And InfoPix is one way to really simplify your understanding of something. And we know when you're trying to make a concept that can be deep, simple, when you're trying to simplify it, you really have to have a great depth of understanding of that concept in order to do it well. So we're going to talk about InfoPix with the Pic Collage app. So let me take you back to my website, and let's go ahead and talk about Pic Collage. So as you can see, I have a sample right here, and this was a middle school classroom. They were using Pic Collage, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's a picture collage app. So you can put together pictures, text, colorful backgrounds, and you can create what ends up being sort of like posters. It prints out well on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper if you wanted to print it, and so on. So they were doing vocabulary, and they each had to take a word, define it, and use it in a sentence, and find images to really show their understanding of that vocabulary word. And this example was obviously gullible, and there's Charlie Brown being gullible. So let's look at a couple other samples. This is from a kindergarten transportation book, and this is such a clever project. And again, this is from Sylvia Tolosano's blog, Languages, which is fabulous. If you're not familiar with it, you will get great ideas. And as you can see, the kids were doing a transportation unit in kindergarten, and they were studying different ways to get around in the world. So they've got buses and camels and kayaks, and they had to select one type of way to get around. She found a bunch of Creative Commons images, and then they had to decide how they would need their buddy to take their picture in order for it to look like they were in that kayak or riding that camel. And then they each contributed a sentence to go with it. And they put this together in a book using the Book Creator app, and you can read more about it. But that's one of the cool things about Pic Collage, is that you can actually cut the image out of the student very, very easily. Kindergartners are very successful with it. And you can overlay it in layers. So that's a kindergarten example. And here's another example using that feature of being able to clip images. They were making a Spanish dictionary. This was actually a first grade classroom. This is an info pic. Oh, actually, this is a panda report. So this example I wanted to share with you because you can see that you can put as little or as much text and images on a page as you want. So in many ways, Pic Collage can be used as your word processing app. So you don't even have to have an image on it. You could simply have a text box, and there's lots of options for what you can make the text look like. So as you can see, this was a 4-page panda report by a second grader with a cover and a page about a couple of different kinds of pandas. So again, Pic Collage can be a lot more than simply just a collage. This is a fun one, and this is my son Joa again, and he was showing his understanding of a dinosaur he had been studying, Brachiosaurus. And he took his image and cut it out in Pic Collage, and he found this picture, this Creative Commons image of a Brachiosaurus, and put it in the background. You can layer within Pic Collage. And then he copied his image 10 times and shrunk him down to show that the Brachiosaurus is about 40 feet tall, or about 10 times as big as his 4-foot height. So what a clever way to really show his understanding and to give other learners a sense of the scale of these amazing dinosaurs. This kind of cracks me up. I would love to ride him to school one day, but I think my principal would not like it. Okay, so here's a 4th grade mission report example. Oh, and this one's not opening either. There we go. Okay. So this was a 4th grade mission report. Let me see if I can zoom in a little. Mission Santa Clara de Assis. And you can see this was actually a little bit of an app smash, in the sense that the student first used the Sketch app. Remember I said you can take maps and annotate them, and then brought in other images and text to create a Pic Collage cover. Here is an example of the vocabulary poster that I showed you at the beginning. And here's a travel poster that a student made on Greece in middle school. That's a 6th grade social studies topic. And as you can see, pictures are layered over the map with text. So those are some possibilities with the app Pic Collage. So let's talk a little bit about Show Me and screencasting. Screencasting is such an awesome way for our students to show their thinking. I really love how it can capture their understanding and thinking, as well as help them to contribute to the learning of other students through sharing their screencast. So there's been a lot of talk about teachers flipping their classrooms, but I really think students should be a part of that process, and they should be flipping the classroom and using a screencasting app. So the one that I want to talk to you about is called Show Me. And I used to have Educreations as my favorite free screencasting app, but I've changed to Show Me. I still like Educreations a lot, and a lot of my examples are Educreations, but could be Show Me's. But then the reason I changed is 2 things. It used to be that Show Me did not have a text tool within it. Well, they've added that. They're always improving these apps. And again, it's a free app. And the other reason is I think it's really fun to use QR codes at open house and be able to have parents look at the students' work from throughout the year. And if they've done show me's and posted them, then that will play on any device. Educreations, you actually have to have the app downloaded on the device in order to view it on a smartphone. But with Show Me, it plays right through the website. So, and you can create student accounts as well. So if you're interested in various screencasting apps, I do have a screencast comparing these tools. So here's a really clever example. The new standards talk about decomposing numbers, and this is another example from kindergarten teacher Matt Gomez, and his students are decomposing numbers and capturing it. And what a fabulous way to share student learning with parents so that when their child comes home, they would know what to talk to that child about. And they could also understand this decomposing numbers, which is kind of a strange language to many of our parents who are not used to the Common Core. And they could talk to their kids and help them to work on their understanding of this concept.
I did 5 plus 5. 7, 2, 4, 6, 4. 6 plus 2 plus 2. 2 plus 2 plus 3 plus 3.
And such a cute example, and really getting at that decomposing numbers. So I have some other examples here that you are free to look at, but I'm going to pull out just a couple. Here is one of a second grader talking about a math money problem in Show Me. And again, it doesn't really matter what the screencasting app is that you're using. It could be Educreations, and some of the examples I'm showing you are from Educreations. It could be Show Me. It could be Explain Everything if you are lucky enough to have the funding to pay for a paid app. But the point is getting to students to be proficient in using these apps so they can design their project to show their learning. So here's an example of students doing some money math.
I have 2 quarters, 2 dimes, 0 nickels, and 3 pennies. This gives me 73 cents.
So I won't show the entire video, but as you can see, what a great way for a student to be showing their understanding, and a way for the teacher and parents to review to see how that child is mastering that math concept. So I want to show you one other example. This again is an example from my son explaining equivalent fractions. And what cracks me up about this example is because it gives us a snapshot into a student's thinking, and at times their gaps or their misunderstandings. And screencasting is such a fabulous way. It's almost like cloning yourself as a teacher. So you can sit there with every single one of your students and listen to them explain their understanding of a concept. We know that that's not possible in a classroom of 30 learners, but with screencasting, this could be reviewed by the teacher at another time. So I'm going to show you.
I'm going to teach you about equivalent fractions.
So he's going to talk about equivalent fractions. And I'm skipping ahead a little bit because he's talking about pizzas and halves and fourths, and he's going to get stuck in a minute. So let's see what happens.
Actually, let's make a carton of eggs.
So pretty challenging to show tenths on a pizza with pizza slices. So he's changing it to a carton of eggs.
And you have and you cut it in half. You have 5 out of 10 eggs. That's equivalent fraction.
All right. So again, what a great way for a teacher to get a glimpse of students' thinking and for them to develop their own thinking in a project that has meaning, and to have to correct their own thinking as they're trying to teach somebody else what they understand about that concept. So I've showed a lot of K through 5 examples. I want to show you one example of a high school chemistry class. And this was a classroom teacher who was having his students in pairs review for the final the various examples that they were going to need to understand for the final. And so each pair took up a concept and they all posted their videos and show me in order to review for the final. So what a fabulous way to use screencasting. And again, I have a handout and I have the directions for the show me posted right there on my website. So we're just about out of time, but I want to leave you with a couple of thought-provoking quotes. Here's one from Rushton Hurley. If students are sharing their work with the world, they want it to be good. If they are sharing it with the teacher, they want it to be good enough. So whenever we can let our kids publish online, at least to share it with their peers in their classroom, but when we can go beyond those classroom walls with screencasting and share it with other learners, parents, family members, very motivating to our students. This is how I manage my centers for apps in the classroom. So again, I try to focus on 3 open-ended apps. Those are not the only 3 I show all year, but I try to get my kids proficient on those 3 apps early on. And I have these centers set up. I keep them in plastic screen protectors in my binder, and I can just pull out the center I want to set up that day and have my kids rotate through. And if they're proficient on those 3 apps, then I don't really have to script the project for them. They get to the point where they are skilled and facile enough with that app that they come up with new ways of sharing their understanding that I would have never conceived of. So a final quote from Alan November: if our children are to grow up to make important contributions to our society, it is essential that we provide them with the powerful tools and experiences across the curriculum. So I hope you were able to learn something today and take it away. I know I didn't actually demonstrate the apps, but on my website at digichica.org, under the training materials, you will find linked videos, tutorials for all the various apps to review, but they are very simple, open-ended apps, so any of them could be mastered pretty quickly. But I have linked a tutorial to kind of give you a quick intro to the app and overview. And don't forget my handouts as well, walk you step by step through using that app. Or if you were to do a training with other teachers, you could you might want to consider using a handout or modifying in some way. All right, well, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. I want to remind you that our series is done for this school year, but we look forward to seeing you next year and hope you will join us at the Contra Costa County Office of Education with our webinar series. I'm Adrienne Duolf, and thank you for joining me today.